Hello and good afternoon, Tinie. Hello, welcome along to our Think About It sessions, where we come along on a Thursday lunchtime every week and share a tiny snippet of a topic that we talk about that we see in the business landscape. So today we are talking about from managers to leaders and how developing people will help you in your business success. Tinie, hello, how are you?
Hey, I'm good, thank you. It's a little bit of a long weekend for me. I've got tomorrow and Monday off a little bit. So yeah, I'm loafing.
Nice. You're already on the wind down for the weekend. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I've got a couple of things that I need to get over the line this afternoon, but then yeah, I'm gonna
Fab.
be driving.
Excellent. Lovely. Okay, so let's talk about, so we're talking about managers versus leader, how investing in your people can help the business success. So let's just start like really top level, like, because let's start. What are we talking about when we're talking managers versus leaders? Like, because there is a distinct difference.
Yeah. So I gave this some thought, and it's something that we're familiar with. And we talk about it, but it hasn't been defined, so to speak. And so when we're leading, we're inspiring, we're vision setting, and we're influencing. And when we're managing, we're delivering, organizing, and maintaining. And all of this is got different skill sets. And so leadership and management are not the same, but they are complementary skills you will need throughout your career. And so if we start there, knowing that there's an overlap, it's then we need to talk about, what differentiates great leaders and managers. But let's go to the basics first.
Yeah. And I think very simply, we're looking at task driven. Management is task driven, isn't it? You're managing your people, you're delivering your goals, whatever it is your team need to achieve. Whereas with your leadership, it's very vision, forward thinking. How are you moving the organization forward? And we now live in a working world where people are having to manage and lead. I think it's a very traditional structure where we had very different levels of these people managed, but these people were seen as leaders. Whereas we know to be a leader, you don't need a title. To be a leader, you don't necessarily need to have a team of people. You can lead regardless of your status, regardless of how many people you have in your team or where you sit in the business. But we are very much seeing people having to take both of these elements into one role now, aren't we? Versus sitting very separate.
Yeah. And if you're in a management role, you're still leading people. You're still trying to influence. You're still trying to get things over the line and getting things done. Your orientation may just be a bit more practical in that sense, where you're having one-to-one sessions with them, performance reviews, doing all of those things from a people management perspective. But also you have a standalone contributor that's sitting at a management level, that's just delivering on a piece of project that they're the only specialist in the small, medium enterprise. But you can still lead in that space. You can still orientate the work you do by showing the awareness that you have to the vision of the business and what direction they're traveling. So there is a I'm not saying I'm saying it is evolved into leading and managing. It needs to be plugged and played where one or the other is needed for that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we visualize or we identify people that we see as really great managers, they're probably great leaders, aren't they? Because people follow leaders willingly. People want to be around them. They can see how they support them, how they're good for the business, how they can enhance, their impact in the business. And I think when you identify someone that's a great manager, it's probably because they just unintentionally or intentionally just a great leader. And I think, how do we go from one to the other? And can we go intentionally? In my opinion, is absolutely yes, we can. And some people are naturally born with a leadership style. versus intentionally having to train for it. But I suppose what we're talking about here is how do we enable managers to step into leadership status, and what that impact of that is from a sustainability perspective on a business. Because and I know we've spoke about it previously, but when we have accidental managers, we're talking about people that have come from doing the in the weeds, the delivering on the task, and then we're putting them into a management position, and then we almost put them into a leadership position, and there's no support or coaching or skill set upskilling going on, is there? And that's where we get a problem.
And so let's be a little bit controversial here and just shake things up a bit. The role that you're in is dictated by the hierarchy created by the business. And I'm saying, what happens if we don't have any managers and we are all just in leadership roles? Or we don't tag it as leadership or managing. We're just saying we are moving the business, and the role we have is the vision of the business. So in other words, there's no title. We are just working to succeed, whatever that vision is. So we are a client-facing business that pursue ultimate colleague value or ultimate customer value, for instance, as a vision. And so all of us carry that title. Whether there are people that are in your team that you're talking to, that you're taking the lead on this project, and then the other person that's strongest in the project will take the lead on that project. So it's rotating the authority, so to speak. It's just creating fluidity in that space and helping us just think differently to the title of manager and the title of leader.
Yeah, and I think we need to remove those boxes, because not old-fashioned, sorry, that's the wrong term, like more traditional businesses, the hierarchy is the leader sits at the top, isn't it? Whereas what we're talking about, what you're saying is you can be a leader at any stage. It depends on your strengths. And I think being able to tap into your people's strengths and enable leadership and empower them at all levels is really impactful. So did you see the message come up? I don't know who it is. It just says LinkedIn user, and it's in listening while I work on my accreditation. So it's one of our accreditation students.
It's one of our.
Happy to see you.
It's one of our peeps. Hello, how you doing? Got a sneaky suspicion of who it is, but yeah. Carrying on with that conversation, and it's then having the discussion of what differentiates great leaders and managers, and because that's what it is. That's why do people want to work for that business and not that business, or for that person and not that person? What are the things that differentiate you as a leader and a manager? And one of the elements is moving beyond the task and results to people engagement. So it's how well are you managing your emotional intelligence, being measured when you come into a space, in a room, managing people. What influence have you got? What currency have you got from people want to interact with you in the moving beyond the task and the result piece?
Have you seen my post today on LinkedIn?
Yes.
For me, fundamentally, there's just one thing that absolutely stands out for me from a good leader. It's emotional intelligence, and all that stuff you've just said stems from having great emotional intelligence. And how are we building that into our managers, into our leaders, into our workforce? Because we're broadening their perspective of not only themselves, but of the business as well.
Yeah. One of the first conversations I remember you and I having when we were building was the one fundamental thing is know yourself.
100%.
And how you manage that for yourself, including limitations, understanding when you are, where your tolerance threshold sits within a emotional regulation space for a particular person or a particular situation, and being able to manage that for yourself in an adult way.
Yeah, and I think a big piece of that is the next stage of being able to adapt to the situation, because we've got the self-awareness piece, right? which is great. But until you can read the room and read the person in front of you and adapt to that, then you've only got one side of the coin from an emotional intelligence piece. So I think that adapting, and it's really important that we're talking about influence here, not manipulation, and that's like a real fine line sometimes. When ego's involved, but it's about how do we do the greater good for everybody in the room to move the business forward in the best possible way. And I think that's really key in any kind of leadership role, but you can have that in a management position as well.
And I like the conversation around the ego and emotional intelligence. Poor ego management and emotional intelligence management thinks manipulation is influencing.
Yes.
Great ego management and emotional intelligence management understands what influencing is.
Yeah. And we do talk about that a lot when we talk about becoming a coach and being a coach and stuff like that. And in my past life in the world of corporate, I spent my whole career in roles that I had to influence without authority. Like I had to get managers and leaders to implement structure, processes, do things that they didn't necessarily want to do, but because of compliance, governance, they had to do it. So I feel like I spent my whole career influencing without having any control of that person. So without having that stick to make them do it. And I just think that is a well-honed skill that I spent probably 15 years trying to master. So it's interesting when you can really clearly see other people doing it and where the line crosses to. That's verging on almost an exchange of manipulation versus a true, this is for the best, isn't it?
Yeah. And make no mistake, there is, it's a skill, as you say, and it's a honed skill that needs to be practiced. And also, sometimes we have a difficult conversation where we've got to just drop the influencing and emotional intelligence and just be a little bit direct. But you can do that in kindness and bearing other people's emotions in mind in having that difficult conversation. And all of these things are skill sets that those people who have managed to sharpen their skill set in those spaces, like moving beyond the task and results into people engagement, taking accountability that creates environments where people take ownership willingly, and setting and managing expectations, ensuring that teams perform efficiently and with clarity, are the things that differentiate the conditions we create and the interactions we have and the experiences that other people have when surrounded by us.
What do you think the challenges are to people moving from managers to leaders or investing in, or not investing? So let me just start with that. What are the challenges that you think that you see around that transition?
It's an interesting one. And I think it's a little bit of 50-50. It's not me sitting on the fence. It's 50%. The leader is not recognizing the skill set in someone that's reporting into them, that they are demonstrating a better skill set in communication or leading or strategic thinking, because their own ego gets in the way. They don't want to be replaced, so to speak. So from an adult thinking point of view, I think it's poor adult thinking from a leader's perspective to get managers moving, so they block the opportunity. The second thing is self-belief. So yes, I want to be promoted. Yes, I see the opportunity, but I don't know. Am I going to be able to do it? Am I willing to get into that place? And a measurement in that space for me is if you're 60 to 70% ready for the next step, for the new role, that's when you're ready to take it, because the other 30% is stretch is going to stretch you, and that's where you're going to do a lot of your learning, depending on the severity of impact of failure in the 30%.
Yeah.
Your manager could guide you and mentor you to actually fulfill and get to the 100% for that role and exceed that, for instance. So managers are saying, oh, you're not 100% ready. That for me is a statement that diminishes someone else.
Yeah. And there's something that's really key in that piece that you've just said there, and that is the support, mentorship and coaching for that individual to get into that role, whether that comes from their line manager or external support such as ours, or the internal development support. I think the ability to have that support really fundamentally changes the level of success and achievement for that transition, and the speed in which that person can transition into that role and be up and running and fully fledged and impactful.
And a forward-looking business sees promotion as onboarding, onboarding into the new role. And what does that look like? And what is the support and opportunity to your points that you've just raised? Are we putting in place as a business to help them succeed quicker? Because that's what you do with the normal onboarding for a new employee, is helping them succeed quicker. And so why not do that for a promotion?
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because I'm not pulling you into this, but I rarely see organizations see internal promotions the same way. It's almost like they already qualified, they can already do it, they're already there, and it's like shortcutting them into the business. But actually you're doing that person a disservice, aren't you, by doing that? Yes, you can see the skill set they've got potential, but actually if we don't support them with on board and onto that role, we're setting them up to fail, or setting them up to be almost, on starting on one foot and then going, oh, you're already within the business, you're up and running, off you go.
So I got involved in 2 businesses who had this in place, and we structured that for ourselves. And the thing about onboarding is, yes, you've got the culture down, from an internal perspective, from an internal promotion perspective. Yes, you got the culture down, you understand that. But what the onboarding process does for you is to recalibrate you in the culture, because there may be some things that you're just doing from a poor experience, and now you're just repeating it that you've seen your manager do. And so you're recalibrating that culture piece again for yourself to realign to that culture piece. Yes, you understand it intrinsically now for yourself, and then your skill set. What is your skill gap that you need when you're presenting to the board level now, which you haven't done before? What is it that they're looking for? How can you be mentored in that space? So those are the practical pieces that sit in there. But I think it's an opportunity for the business to realign that individual that they've promoted to the business's orientation again. And it's an opportunity missed, I think, for those who aren't doing it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's also an element of the change of perspective going from one to the other. And yes, I know it's if you're internal, you're part of the culture already, but actually being part of a culture in a management level versus in a leadership level, where you're ultimately more visible, you have more impact, your shadow is cast much wider, people see you, you need to make sure that you're aware of your behaviors, you're aware of the perception of people of you, and all these things that you might not necessarily consider once you're in that management, in the business kind of thing. So why are we talking about this? Why does this matter? Why are we bringing this to the attention of those that are listening? Why do we think it needs to be up for consideration?
What's happening is assumption, and businesses are assuming that because someone is a great manager that they will become a leader automatically, or that people are accidental people managers, and they'll just grow into it. And I think I don't know if businesses are getting lazy in the fact that they're paying attention to all these other things that are regulations that are coming from governments around people and looking after their wellness, where they're not looking at the actual fitting into the leadership and management roles that people are having in businesses, and making those phenomenal, and creating and helping those people create great experiences for their people. And I don't know if the focus has just gone off that and for me that's sad, because I see so many businesses that don't pay attention to that are underperforming.
Yeah. And I think, just to add on to that, I think businesses are becoming a flatter structure.
Yes.
And I think more people are getting involved with different areas, different elements. And I feel that the role of being a leader, going back to what you were saying previously, almost filters down a little bit more. And it's around removing that traditional hierarchy almost, because we've created flatter structures, but we haven't actually done any kind of support, upskilling to support that. And that's when you get people who aren't performing because they just haven't been taken on that transition, or they haven't been given the support they need. And then you get into the position where people are underperforming, potentially being exited from their role, moved because they aren't hitting their KPI, I think.
Yeah. And if we look at it typically, versus now that we're transitioning into a flat structure, when we typically look at it, 20% sit up top, 80% sit below. In a 100 structured business, the top 20% are forward-looking visionary leaders that have 80% of their skill set is in the leadership space, and 20% of their skill set is in the management space. Whereas the 80% of the business that's sitting in the bottom structure are 20% leadership skills orientated and 80% management skills orientated. And now with the flat structure, you're required more of that leadership skills of influencing, setting a vision, and orientating towards the future, versus getting the practical things done. You need a bit of both. So I think it's becoming a 40-60 split, so to speak. But as we said in the beginning, these are combined skills that complement each other, that you need throughout your career.
Absolutely. So if for anybody listening who, I think from a perspective of being a coach or being within a business, whether you're a leader, a manager, a business owner, building a team, what do we want people to take away from this? Because I think it fits to every one of those roles and even wider. What do we want them to really become aware of, to understand, to take action on?
So there's three things in my mind, and that is looking at the differentiator. What is differentiating you? And the three things that we called out earlier was moving beyond tasks and results to people engagement. So coaching people on their people engagement. The second piece is the accountability that creates an environment where people take ownership willingly, which is partly influencing and partly accountability. And how do we coach people to orientate towards that for themselves? And then the third thing is the setting and managing of expectations to ensure that teams perform efficiently and with clarity. And it's understanding how you have that communication, whether it's a difficult conversation, it's a performance conversation, or a empowering conversation. And we can coach on all three of those things with the people that we're coaching to help them differentiate themselves as leaders or managers.
And empowerment is what I wrote down, is like, how are we empowering our people to take responsibility for them, for that? And I think there's an element, a huge element for me, is around, is your culture fit for purpose to what you want to achieve? And have you upskilled your staff and trained your staff and effectively communicated that? Because sometimes we need a bit of a recalibration, whether that's changing external landscape, internal, the growth of the business. Things change. And I think sometimes a recalibration to go, where are we heading? What do we want to achieve? And are we empowering our people to do that? And I think also that output-based performance rather than the micromanagement, you have to sit at your desk for this amount of time. It's like, how are we empowering people to deliver and to perform and to be the best they can be, and focus on that output rather than the input? of hours for me. But that's gone down another rabbit hole. But yeah.
What's becoming prevalent in today's working world is the toward reward orientation.
Yeah.
As opposed to away from threat. I want to go and do this because I'm excited about it, and not because Tienie asked me to do it. It's because we've had a discussion about it, and I can see how this can help me build my skill set for a potential promotion in 6 months' time or 8 months' time. And it's having those meaningful conversations that orientate towards reward, which sits brilliantly in the whole neuroscience of the working environment that we create and the conditions that we create to help people. And instead of saying, oh, I don't want to do this job anymore and I'm going to look for another job somewhere, is away from threat.
Yeah.
So they're not orientating. So creating an orientation that is towards reward, in whichever format that looks like, is a good discussion to have, which sits in all three of those elements of how you differentiate yourself.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a parting note I would say is don't wait for a title to become a leader. Like start to explore the bigger vision, what's going on, get in conversations, start to flex those muscles, work on your emotional intelligence and self-awareness,
Yeah. No, and so coming back full circle to that statement where let's take leading and managing out as titles and just put the vision in as the title, and let's all work towards that. Yes, you're going to take accountability and responsibility for that group of people, but then John will take over tomorrow, or Kirsty will take over the day after. But so no ego gets involved. It's the project and the task that gets the main focus here.
The status is left at the door.
Status is left at the door. We had a facilitation session a couple of days ago, about a month and a half ago, where I asked people to write their title. It was a group of C-suite gentlemen and ladies. Write your title on the piece of paper, put it in my hat. I'm taking the hat and I'm putting it outside the door, and let's just talk names today.
Yeah, remove that. I love it.
Including the CEO. And it was an interesting event.
I think it's refreshing to help people to see things from that perspective. Like, absolutely. Okay, right. We've come to the end of the session. Once again, Tienie, great chatting, great topic. And hopefully we've given people a little bit of food for thought and help them with how they lead and manage their people. And we'll see you next week.
And guys, just interact with us. Just send us a DM on LinkedIn, or email us directly, or go to the website, theethicalcoachingcompany.com, and just let's just
we want to hear from you.